I'd like to start out with your latest role in Authors Anonymous. I spoke to the filmmakers last week, and it's a very funny, really nice movie that I enjoyed very much, and I was just wanting you to fill our audience in on the role you play.
Okay. Well, there's an old saying, silence is golden, and that is hopefully attributable to my role. I play Dr. Zero Min. I am the spiritual advisor to Terry Polo's character, who of the writing group is somewhat of the flighty, flakier variety. And she is a spiritual advisor, Dr. Zero Min. I have taken a vow of silence for a year, protest climate change, which in and of itself is pretty funny, right? Well, she kind of uses me like an accessory, as if I was a chihuahua in her purse. She drags me along everywhere and anywhere. I'm just part of her accoutrements. And, for instance, as part of this struggling group of perspiring writers, I should say, not actors, that would be me. But in this case, part of a group, a support group, Authors Anonymous is about that, sort of networking group of wannabes. And she brings me to the literary agent, for hopeful representation. I get the book deal. She brings me to the support group, and everybody is somewhat slinging arrows at her and me without saying a word, which is great and difficult for an actor and a former stand-up comic to not say anything, to minimalize is a challenge. Because any actor that gets a new script, the inclination is not to read the script first. Let me see how many lines I have. Okay?
Right.
How many scenes am I in? And it's like counting the syllables. And, when you recognize that, wow, this is a funny set of circumstances, but I don't say anything. Well, I was all on board with that. Ellie Canner, the director I had worked with on another film, and she thought of me for this role. I was honored and thrilled to be part of it. But not saying anything is challenging for actors, part and parcel of the thing. We like lines, and we like a lot of them.
Well, it is interesting because I always notice this when I watch films, the power of silence, and even watching actors in a scene. And I think the best actors always say, don't feel like you have to do anything. The camera will be there to pick you up, and my eyes always go to the person in the scene who is just listening. There's a real power in that. I mean, do you sense that as well?
A lot of the acting, particularly film, even more so than TV, which are a lot more quick cuts, and you have more bells and whistles, and it's more formulaic. But the process of filmmaking for an actor, it's between the lines. It's actually when they come around, when they say they're coming around to Robb, so the camera's now on me versus the other actor. Most of the gems and the entertaining or the compelling nature of when we make choices as actors is when we are listening, when we are reacting, when we're not necessarily running our mouths like I am now. But absolutely right. It's so much in the eyes and the subtleties of the facial expressions off of hearing and listening to the other actor.
Yeah. Did you meant? Go ahead.
Sorry. No, you go ahead. I got to at least have you get off 3 questions in 25 minutes because I have a tendency to talk a lot. So I'll let you.
No, I love it. I love it. That's less work for me. So feel free. So you mentioned that you were in stand-up comedy. Did you segue from that into acting? How did that transition
I sure
work?
did, and I had a diabolical scheme. I was accused and somewhat practiced developing a stage presence throughout my pre-adolescence, my adolescence, and younger life growing up in New York, which you almost have to be to survive in New York to a certain extent. Everybody is somewhat competitive in a voice or what they have to say. But all of that being said, I toured comedy clubs for about 10 years, and it's the most singular, difficult thing in all of show business. It made, and there's challenges and nuances and difficulties to the degree of that vary from TV to theater to film, but nothing is as difficult as stand-up comedy. So in the decade that I did preceding doing film and TV, and I've done about 40 network TV shows and studio films, there's no greater training than stand-up comedy. And I developed it to the extent of the nuances and the science and the studying of doing stand-up comedy. It's a perverse thing. Comedy clubs are a lot different than theater pieces when you become a huge sensation and you're playing theaters, so to speak, or arenas or stadiums even. But in a club comic really has to deploy a lot of psychological salesmanship to hook an audience and learn the craft in holding the attention and grabbing the attention within the first 30 seconds of a 20, 45 hour minute set.
You know, it's interesting to me that as an actor, obviously, you assume the persona of whatever character you happen to be playing. But as a stand-up comedian, did you feel the need to create a persona for yourself in that capacity? I mean, did it fall in line with acting in that way?
Oh, absolutely. What has to come first is the proverbial stage presence, which is a sort of a nebulous term for developing or pre-development of a character or an attitude. That has to come first before you eventually learn how to write for yourself. And there's an old adage, I heard Milton Berle say this: a comic says funny things, and a comedian says things in a funny way. Well, when you're doing stand-up comedy, it's more in the latter realm. You have to somewhat develop a sense of knowing, have a take, have a strong attitude. I was an observationalist, so to speak, but there's variations thereof. But you have to have an attitude that belies the material, because once you develop that character, as you said, or as I'm saying, the attitude, and you can start to understand how to better write for yourself, the material becomes bulletproof. You always hear of thievery in, this comic stole that bit from this guy, and there's certain guys that have been legendary, notorious. Well, they're more comics, and they tell jokes, classic punchline, set-up punchline jokes. If you've written and developed your character really well, nobody can make it work except you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's not a... Yes, sir.
Also something very important, I think you just said, was the type of comic that you were, which was observational, which that means everything for an actor as well. But I'm curious, once you started into film and television, was there a learning curve involved in feeling comfortable with how to work across from that camera?
Oh, absolutely. Well, I was fortunate enough when I was based in Dallas, Texas, as a stand-up comic, and I mentioned I grew up in New York. I actually started my stand-up career in Charlotte, North Carolina, and you might say, well, that's a fish out of water. You were right there in New York. Well, I hadn't yet embarked on my career. All that being said, in Dallas, I was very lucky and fortunate enough to have studied film acting, film technique, at Adam Rourke's Film Actors Lab. Adam Rourke passed away many, many years ago, but I owe an awful lot to him. Lou Diamond Phillips and I were classmates back then in Dallas, and Adam taught how to act precisely for the camera. He didn't teach us theater exercises, make believe you're a tree and leave, none of that, esoteric, unuseful jargon stuff. He taught us technically how to act for the camera. And there's differences in a master shot, which encompasses more than two people, or just singularly yourself, but it's further away and picking up more of the peripheral in the shot. And then there's a two-shot where it's maybe you and one other actor. And then there's the close-up, the proverbial close-up. Well, you have to know how to match the emotion and yet bring it down as the camera comes in tighter. Yeah. He told me so much, because when you get hired, whether it's a look, sometimes, we like to think that the whole world appreciates our extraordinary talent. Well, we do have some talent, and there is some specificity to the talent that an actor has. But, sometimes you get cast just because you matched up right with somebody else, and you got credits on your resume. They already assume that you know your way around the set or around all the technological stuff. The fact of the matter is, when you're in a scene with somebody, and maybe they're the star, and I don't want to name names as though they're prima donnas or divas or whatever, but it's their right. They've earned the right. Once they've done their stuff, the camera's on them. And it's not on you. You still have to give an off-camera performance, and then the camera comes around on you. There's times when I was playing to a little piece of tape to the side of the camera as if that was the other character. Well, you need to know how to do that and be comfortable with that. Otherwise, when they yell action, and ostensibly when they yell action, that what they're saying is, when we say action, we want you to act natural. And it's very unnatural to act natural when there's 100 people around you with all this technical equipment and they yell action. And if you're playing a specific action and a specific emotion to a piece of tape, well, that could be, disarming and can throw you.
Well, and I think that a lot of times we hear actors talk about building an internal life for the characters that they play, but we don't often hear about the technical aspect of film acting. I mean, the great actors have to be of both minds.
Yes, you have to be able to submerge into the inner life or the inner voice of a character, all the while being totally aware of the cables and the boom mic and the lighting and the multiple cameras. You have to be aware of that. It's kind of schizophrenic in a way, because you have to dig inwardly to create that inner life for whatever character you're playing, and then simultaneously be very acutely aware of all the external equipment. It's kind of trippy. One of the most nervous moments of my career, when you do a live audience sitcom, they call it a 3-camera, although sometimes it could be more. When you have 400 people in an audience that have been sitting in their seats with, bribed with pizza and tchotchkes and stuff to see what we've been working on for 4 days put up and aired, so to speak. When I did Married with Children, it wasn't a recurring role, but it was a pivotal guest star role. And this is a 3-camera live audience show, taped before a live audience. And at the time that I did the show, the Bundys were, the bunkers of their generation. I mean, everybody, knew the Bundys' living room. Well, I played a mailman, and I had to make an entrance into the Bundys' living room with all of the main characters already set in the scene. It's a lot more daunting to make an entrance on a top 10 TV show than it is to already be set in the scene. already in there, when they yell action and go to the next scene, already be in the living room. I had an audio cue, a doorbell, and on the other side of the Bundy's living room are sandbags holding up wood planks, holding up the set, and it's not lit. It's not like they have the setting outside off camera, like it's a porch and trees and a driveway. So I'm standing there with these huge satchels of mail that don't weigh total more than 2 ounces, and I'm waiting for a doorbell cue. Well, I can only tell you, Jamie, in an instant, I caught myself feeling as though this is a surreal dream, and almost cosmically being sucked up into a funnel cloud. And I said, "You got to get it together." I mean, in an instant, because this, like Pavlov's dog, this doorbell's going to ring in a minute, and you're going to really have to burst into this room with what's going to propel the entirety of this particular story. Well, yeah, there's so many unnatural settings that you have to encounter as an actor and make it seem like, it's just everyday, mundane stuff.
Do you still find that you have to battle nerves, or are the nerves gone?
Nerves are different than butterflies. There's a fine line, right? Let's say you're in school and you're a bad test taker, okay? Well, you're going to be nervous as hell, and you're going to do bad on the test because when they say, okay, you got 45 minutes, you have like a brain freeze, okay? Well, that's different than butterflies. Butterflies are positive nervous energy that you as an experienced actor know how to channel it. The key is to harness that energy, because sometimes actors will say, well, if you don't have those butterflies, you better be worried because you're not going to have that inner life, okay? And it's going to be flat. But if you have the proverbial butterflies, you got the juices flowing. That just means you're alive inside. You just have to know how to channel it and fine-tune it and hit that, be in that zone, as they say in sports, whether you're playing football, baseball, basketball, or golf. And so nerves, so to speak, are good, but it's not coming from a place of lack of confidence or searching or wondering. It's just a matter of it's basically if you were having a cardiology exam, all right, and they need to ramp up your heart rate, over a period of time to see whether or not you can withstand the stress, which is why it's called a stress test. Well, it's kind of like that. It's kind of like that adrenaline rush. So you're not nervous, but your juices are certainly flowing.
I know what you're saying because I'm not a professional. I've never been a professional actor, but I've done my share of theater here and there over the years, and I've always felt like when I don't have those butterflies, I do get worried because the performance is usually going to be lazy, at least in my case. Yeah, because if you have those butterflies, it means that you care. I mean, that you really have a stake and you feel it. So I understand.
Well, not
completely.
only that you care, Jamie, that you're focused. Your mind is on the task at hand, right? Because if you didn't have that, you might be thinking about, did I set the alarm? Did I feed the dog? Those are not good things. I mean, they're good for your domestic life, but not when you're about to go on stage before the camera.
Right. So when you're doing something like Married with Children or any of the many TV series that you've done in guest roles, I ask this of directors that do TV as well, because it must be an interesting dynamic that this is already a family that has been established and they're very comfortable with each other, and you truly are like a guest in their family. Is it difficult to acclimate yourself to those particular environments? Well,
you're very perceptive and intuitive and intelligent with that, because I was going to use that exact reference, that you do feel like you're an invited guest. You're not an unwanted guest, but you're an invited guest. I mean, look at the term, a guest star. Okay, I mean that's generic, but you are a guest into that family. And it varies from show to show. And each show has a core family, but each show also has a different demeanor, a different flavor, a different atmosphere. Some sets are more tense. Some sets are more welcoming. They have a figurative welcome mat, and you do feel part of the family. Others, you say, it's just like in our everyday life, if you're married or single or whatever, you're invited to a party and you leave the party and go, man, that was fun, man. I want to see those people again. You leave some TV shows, you say, I don't want to go back to that. I didn't particularly like that party, I mean, it was a great gig, but, man, they got some issues over there. And that happens. I mean, and there's so many things. I won't name names because that's not what this is about, and I don't like to do that. But, there's also different dynamics when somebody's coming back to a hit TV show after the hiatus, the summer hiatus, the 2 or 3 months they take off. And they might have a new showrunner, which is like the executive producer. And there's politics that go on in television. Mm-hmm. Film generally, big studio films, there's certain very precise casting, and a lot of films like Authors Anonymous, there's a little leeway in an independent film. And by the way, I've seen the film. I'm going to the premiere tonight. It's on VOD, Video on Demand. I recommend it to anybody out there, not to diss Adam Sandler, because that's a different type of comedy. And I've done those movies. I've done the Rob Schneider comedies. But this is a mature comedy, and it moves. It really, really moves. And it's intelligent, it's funny, it's smart, it's entertaining, but it's an indie film. And I was fortunate to have worked with Ellie Cantor, who is one of my favorite directors, because she's just such an actor's director. And what I mean by that is there's some directors that treat actors like they're furniture, and I'm not exaggerating. I mean, they're just props for their bigger vision, so to speak. But she really has a feel for giving actors their latitude, their leash a little bit, and when she needs to tighten the leash, she'll do it in a way that doesn't make you feel bad. She's excellent.
Well, and I was going to ask about your work with Ellie because you talk about feeling comfortable in a company of actors, and that's essential for a movie like Authors Anonymous that lives or dies by the ensemble quality of it. And you could tell these actors really gel, that they're very comfortable with each other, and Ellie probably created an environment in which that could thrive.
She does, and that's a major part of being a director. Is to pull everything together and foster all the positive energies, and somehow, dismiss or cut away the extraneous negative energies, because it's by nature a very emotionally charged process. You're asking a bunch of talented, creative types behind the camera, in front of the camera, to go from 0 to 60 in 2 seconds, and to orchestrate that in a consistent manner of speaking, to produce a 90-minute, 120-minute film is you got to have an extraordinary amount of patience. Ellie has background in casting, so she knows how actors can be in a tense situation. And she's just extreme. She's a wonderful person too. I'm her biggest fan, and I've worked with her on 2 films. I hope to work with her in the future as well. But there are some directors that, I was in a very big movie. I won't mention who. I didn't have any interaction with the director. He turned my body clockwise by 2 notches, and that was it. So there's vast vast range of nuances to that aspect of filmmaking as well. But,
so before I let you go, I never know whether or not to believe what I read, but I want to ask you about something that's upcoming for you. Are you playing, or have you played, Howard Cosell in the new De Niro movie?
I did, and I did, and hopefully you'll see it as well as a couple of 100 million other people. But yes, it's called Hands of Stone. It's actually a biopic about Roberto Duran, one of the all-time greatest boxers. His story, I shot for about a half a month in Panama, and it centers on the relationship between Roberto Duran and his Hall of Fame legendary trainer, Ray Arcel, played by Robert De Niro. Usher plays Sugar Ray Leonard. It's got a great cast. And I was fortunate enough to have portrayed Howard Cosell. And that the irony of that, and I'll kind of leave with this, is that here we started 25 minutes ago chatting and getting to know each other, talking about Authors Anonymous and my role in Authors Anonymous, playing Dr. Zierman, who says nothing. That's one end of the spectrum. Arguably, Howard Cosell would be on anybody's other end of the spectrum. I mean, verbose, bombastic, loud, brash, and to have played him in the piece Hands of Stone was a thrill, and to work with Robert De Niro. But I am going to mention one person's name, Jonathan Jakubowicz, who's the director of Hands of Stone, a la an Ellie Canner, very much an actor's director, and relating to and finding moments that on a page most directors would just toss away or gloss over. So yes, thank you for mentioning that. I appreciate that.
It's fascinating to me because how do you play someone like Cosell without making him a parody? I mean, he was such a kind of a colorful cultural figure to begin with. It must be a challenge to hold on to the reality of that instead of the impersonation of him.
Well, again, very astute comment, Jamie, and here's the key. Because as a stand-up comic, I did a lot of impressions, and I still do a lot of impressions. But that would be death if I was doing an impression of Howard Cosell. So, again, even though he's an iconic, a legendary figure, recognizable figure, everybody still has an inner voice. So, it's easy to just superficially surface Howard Cosell. Because, it's like a musician. Oh, you know what riffs they play, right? So I could have riffed and done those riffs, even though I had a lot of singular speeches because he was broadcasting fights and interviewing people throughout the movie. But if I did that, that would be one-dimensional or two-dimensional. And, the director said, and they had a hard time, I guess, casting Cosell. They looked in New York. They saw a lot of people in New York, and they eventually came out to L.A., and luckily I was available to do it. And I Skyped with Jonathan, who was based in Panama, getting ready to shoot the film. And, I understand Cosell or that character. So it's not that I just knew who he was, and it wasn't that I just knew how to do an impression of him. But I understand who he was, and I understand the role that he played in the Roberto Duran story. And even though it would be easy and painfully wrong to try to do an impression, you have to give, whether it's an anonymous, and I'm kind of being punny there, character, or a very recognizable, iconic figure, you still have to bring that inner life.